Hello folks, Rich Bonaduce here with my first ever drum chat video. If you've decided to buy an electronic drum set and you're thinking of going with Roland, that's what I did, you might be wondering, TD-50, TD-30. Well, I'm here to tell you, TD-30. I know spoiler alert, TD-30. I'm going to talk, like I always do, using the Oreo method. You got your two Oreos, right? The double stuff in the middle. I'm going to tell you right up front what I think. So if you just want to know that, I guess you can leave now. You don't have to stick around. And I will remind you at the end, yes, that is my point. All that double stuff in the middle, that's the good stuff. That's why the TD-30 over the TD-50. But if you've already found out all you need to know, bye. I'll see you later. But if you want to stick around and discover why the TD-30 over the TD-50 for someone who owns both of them, I will tell you. TD-30, TD-50, they both have their pros and cons. I would say the most obvious con to the TD-50 is that it costs considerably more than the TD-30. Now, that's if you buy it brand new. If you buy it used, like I did on a demo deal or something like that, you can probably get a pretty good price for it. In fact, you can probably get a TD-50 for the cost of a TD-30, which would eliminate that con. You would think. I'm using my electronic kit as my kit for my cover band, which is a great idea for electronic kits because they have so many different sounds in them. You can have a country kit. Press a button, you got a rock kit. Press a button, you got a funk kit. Press a button, you got a jazz kit. Press a button, you have an 80s Simmons kit. And that's what's particularly great about an electronic drum kit. You can have all these cool sounds. But also, it's portability. Well, this thing weighs a whole lot for a digital snare drum. More than some actual snare drums. For sure, this KD-140 weighs more than any bass drum I have ever had, acoustic bass drum that I've ever had. Now, granted, it doesn't take up the same footprint, it doesn't take up the same space in your car or van, but still, it weighs a whole lot, and all that is there to support a strike zone of about this big. In order to realize all the cool stuff in the TD-50, you also have to get the digital snare and the digital ride cymbal. Now, the digital ride cymbal is 18 inches in diameter. It's a cool weight. Again, that's one of the pros about it. It's a cool weight, it's a cool size, but here's the problem with having, again, this size cymbal. Roland, to my knowledge, to this date of this video anyway, does not make a case that actually holds their TD-50 kit. You'll want cases or bags for this stuff because if you're spending this kind of money on your kit and you're bringing it out to live gigs, you want to take care of it. Unfortunately, that cymbal, this bass drum doesn't fit in almost any case that I have found. The other thing is, if you have this digital snare, you must have a snare stand. There is no mounting arm on that snare drum to mount to this rather impressive and heavy cage. Unlike the toms, whoops, sorry about that. Sensitive. Unlike the toms that have their own arms, the snare, this digital snare, does not. Now, if you use something else, like one of these, as a snare, well, that's great, but then it isn't digital. And the whole deal with this TD-50 is that it has a digital snare and ride. And that is very good. There are a couple really cool things about these triggers specifically that you will not find in these triggers or these triggers, okay? One of them is this, watch. See that? I didn't even have to choke it like you do with these. All I have to do is put my hand on the cymbal and it chokes. Apparently it senses the static electricity in your hand and knows that you are muting the cymbal like you would a real cymbal. Isn't that cool? I don't know if it's thousands of dollars cool, but it's kind of cool. The other thing is that there's a ton of sensors packed into these triggers So much so that it needs a USB cord that is supplied, by the way, that comes out into your brain, and you've got 3 USB inputs over here, which leads me to believe that they're probably going to update the hi-hat to digital USB, because although the VH13, I think it's called, is really sensitive, look at that. It's not digital yet, so maybe at some point this will be a digital hi-hat. So for the most sensitive parts of your kit, the ride, the snare, and the hi-hat will be all super digital and go in there and be crazy sensitive and all that. Some of you might argue that the bass drum should be like that, and I kind of agree. Some of you would argue they should all be like that, and I agree with that too. But you know, that would be a very expensive brain and a whole lot of memory in here that's gotta take up space. And that's kind of the other problem with the TD-50. The snare and this ride cymbal send a lot of signal to this brain. I should point out there's another cool thing about the snare before we go any further. It used to be that you would have to tell your brain, that brain, with this brain, that you want a cross stick sound in the rim of your snare drum, right? Although what that meant is if you accidentally only hit the rim, it would come out as this sound. So if somewhere in there you end up trying to do a rim shot or something light and you end up just tapping the rim, it comes out as instead of, right? Well, not so anymore with this new digital snare drum, and it's really cool. Again, it senses, I think, the static electricity of your hand so that when you put your stick down to cross stick, it knows it, and it just uses that sound instead of the rim when your hand isn't there. That's pretty cool technology. Is it worth all the thousands of dollars? Is it worth not being able to mount this to this very expensive, very heavy stand? Is it worth having to buy a very meaty snare drum stand in addition to all this other crap just to hold this thing up? It's just another thing you have to buy. It's another thing you have to set up, another thing you got to break down, another thing you got to carry around. The only other thing about some of the negative aspects of these triggers, we talked about how big this thing is. If you thought these felt weird compared to a real snare drum, compared to a real tom, this one feels even weirder than those. There's some kind of foam down in there. It feels like you're hitting a very solid pillow. It's cool, but it is a yet another feel different from the ones you may have already gotten used to on your toms. Okay, fine. But you might be thinking, well, still, okay, so what? That's a little big. I'll pack that around differently. So what? This is a little heavy. Hey, I'm already carrying around a throne. I can carry around a snare drum stand. Oh, okay, fine. But the brain itself, I'm very upset with Roland about the TD-50s. Because of these two triggers specifically, because of how much information they have packed into them and they send to your brain, they had to lose some sounds in the brain. When I had a TD-20, for instance, one of the things I really liked was on the ride cymbal, you got a bell, the bow, and the edge. Right? So you got all these sounds in here. This is essentially a 3-zone trigger. Because these are triggers, you can move those sounds around anywhere you want. So I'm not a guy that rides very much on the, or crashes, I should say, on the edge of the ride cymbal. You know, a lot of guys are like this. I don't do that. If I'm going to crash like that, I'm going to crash on the crash. Fine. So I thought, I don't really need the edge of the ride cymbal sound in the edge of this ride cymbal trigger. I don't really need this sound. I rarely use that sound. I use this one. I use this, the bell, sure. I rarely use that edge. So I thought, I'm going to put another sound in there. So what I ended up doing was, I put a splash cymbal on the edge of my ride cymbal, or a China boy, or a tambourine, or a triangle, anything. And it was really kind of cool because I didn't need this whole other stand and this whole other arm and this whole other trigger, spend all that money. And it was not only inexpensive, but it was kind of fun because regular patterns that you always play on the ride cymbal, well, now you can add a little splash in there on the offbeat or something. It was so cool. It was great to do. And you can do that with the TD-30 and the TD-50. Absolutely no problem. But here's something I also liked. The sounds that they had in the TD-20, one of the sounds they had was called a flat ride cymbal. I think they called it clean, but it was a flat ride cymbal. Now, I don't know if you know, flat rides have no bell, hence the name flat ride. But the thing is, the bell controls overtones. And the bell also has that extra sound on it, right? This sounds like one thing, that sounds like another, right? But on a flat ride, you don't have that. You don't have that extra sound to go up to. But you get very clean, very pronounced ride cymbal sounds because there's almost no overtones because there's no bell. So it's a very clean sound. And I was like, I really like playing flat rides. I owned a flat ride, but I hated it because, again, the pros and cons, I hated it because it didn't have a bell. So as much as I liked having a flat ride because there were no overtones and you could hear every little stick definition, I missed having a bell. Well, in the virtual age, you can do whatever you want. So what I did was I put the flat ride sound on the bow, and then I picked my favorite bell sound, say a ping bell, whatever, and I put that there, and I put a China boy on the edge. 3 different sounds, 1 trigger. It was great. Then the expanded unit came along. You put a little card in the back and expanded the unit, and they took the flat sound away. Why are they taking sounds away if it's expanded? I don't get it. I don't get it at all. So anyway, I assumed incorrectly that the TD-50 would have like all of the best sounds from the TD-20 expanded and then some, right? I mean, it's been years. They're gonna have all kinds of new stuff. If you're unfamiliar with the TD-20, they had something like 50 or 70 snare drums in there and 100 bass drums, and they had birch toms, and they had maple toms, and they had old Ludwigs, and they had all these different kinds of toms, and walnut, and this and that. So you could have, if you wanted, a birch kit with a birch snare, and a maple kit with a maple snare, or bobinga, or walnut, or whatever. They would have acrylic, and they had steel snares, and brass snares, and titanium snares. They had a titanium snare in there. I don't know if you've ever played a titanium snare. I haven't, but I played a digital one, a virtual one. I loved the sound. Now, real titanium snares are very expensive, $600 to like $1,200 just for one snare. I don't have that kind of money, so just for a snare drum. But I loved playing it because I could play this titanium kit with like everything I ever wanted. So I get this TD-50. You know how many different hi-hats, for instance, you have in this brain? The TD-20 had something like 25 different hi-hats. You know how many you have? 2. That's it. That's it. You have what they called a traditional lathed, or I believe they call it a dark and warm. That's it. Everything else is electronic crap. Like, no, that's pretty much it. Club hi-hat. All these process things, hip hop, low step, voice hi-hat, spokes. But as far as actual acoustic sounds, dark and warm or traditional lathe, that's it. That's what you're stuck with. Now you can change that up. You can change the thickness, you can change the size, etc. But the fact of the matter is you're still changing that sound's size. It's not a completely different sound. They only have like a couple ride cymbals in it. They only have, I think, 5 snares or something. It's ridiculous that they actually had to delete sounds in the TD-50 to make room for all of the digital input of these 2 triggers. At least that's what I think they had to do. So I've been very unhappy because you basically have, you still have 50 kits or so, and then I think it's something like 50 user kits. Yeah, there you go. So you can make those. But because you're so limited in the kind of sounds that you have, they all kind of sound the same. They sound pretty similar anyway, because you're stuck with, they love this Jaraply, whatever the hell that is, and they have some walnut and power metal and babinga, and that's pretty much it. I was really ticked when I found out I only had 5 snares. 5 snares. Now you might be saying, what the hell do you need more than 5 snares for? That's the whole point of this thing. I can't carry around gongs, I can't carry around timpanis and all that stuff. That's why I want them in there. That's why I want all the different snares. That's why I want a steel snare and a brass snare and a walnut snare and a maple snare and an acrylic snare and a titanium snare and everything else in between, so that I can have fun with it out on my cover gig. I don't want 4 or 5. I can carry around 2 or 3 snares acoustically. I want more than what I can carry around acoustically. And it really matters when you get into the acoustic samplings of cymbals and toms. You only have a couple of different ride cymbals to choose from, and that's what you're supposed to use for everything you want. Same way with the crashes, same way with the different kinds of cymbals. They used to have these really great China boys. Then I have like 2. And that's it. If you don't like them, tough. I'm really miffed at Roland for this. By the way, I contacted them about this, wrote to them, and said, well, surely I can get a copy of the old stuff, some of the other sounds that I like, and load them in, right? And they're like, no. They actually have a port for a card, but you can only load like whole kits at once. Apparently you can't load individual sounds and then build kits from them. I haven't even bothered to try it because I was so miffed at Roland. Maybe you can. That isn't the only thing that's wrong with the TD-50. The TD-50, depending on the kit you get, comes with different kinds of triggers here. Some of them are thinner than others, and they're fine. Actually, the thin ones are great. If you're looking for portability, there's no reason to go for these big ones. But I got such a good deal on the demo version that I thought, why not? We'll do it and have the nice stuff for about the same cost. But what comes with that kit, and what comes with a lot of the kits that come with the TD-50, is obviously the digital cymbal and the digital snare. Digital ride, digital snare. But you also get this one, CY 14-inch crash. And the crash has 2 zones, the bow and the edge. Right? But this one is used as a ride cymbal in the lower line Rolands, and it's a CY 15RC, I believe they call it. It's 15 inches as opposed to 14. Ride crash, ride cymbal maybe even. And it actually has 3 zones. It has 2 chords in the back, 1 chord and 2 inputs on the brain. So 1 chord will take care of the bow and the bell, and the other chord will take care of the bow and the edge. So you get that. In fact, this is what I was using back on the TD-20 when I did that 3-zone thing that I was telling you about. So I'm sitting here going, oh, well, cool. Okay, I have their high advanced digital cymbal, right? This ride cymbal that's so awesome and everybody loves, but they gave me this 3-zone other cymbal too, and the chords for it. So I might as well plug. So by the way, this has a USB plug like we talked about. So it goes into that port, which means I still have my ride cymbal 1/4-inch jacks available to me. So I went, great, I'm going to plug in this 3-zone 15-inch RC with the 2 chords into the ride ports and still use it as a crash. But I can put 3 things in there. If I want to, I can go up on the bell of the crash, which I rarely use the bell of a crash. Maybe you do, good for you. I rarely do, so I thought I'll put something in there, like a triangle or a wood block or whatever. Well, guess what? You can't do that. When you plug in the USB plug into the TD-50, which is like the whole reason why you're getting the TD-50, it shuts off the analog ports for the ride cymbal. That's right, those 2 1/4-inch ride cymbal jacks are dead to you once you plug this in. Again, apparently, these things send so much information, Roland had to steal it from somewhere. So they stole it from the amount of sounds that come with this kit and the amount of inputs that you can use. By the way, it's the same thing with your digital snare. When you plug in the USB plug into the USB port, it shuts off the number 2 1/4-inch snare jack. I was going to get another little trigger like these BT, this is a BT1. So you can put a totally different sound in. I was going to put one over here and have like a side snare. I was going to plug that into snare number 2 because it's open. This uses a completely different port. And have a side snare, have an extra trigger over here using that snare drum. Not that they gave me a whole lot of snare drums to use, but you can put anything in there you wanted to. Except once you plug in this digital snare, it shuts off the 1/4-inch analog snare jack. You actually lose ports, in my opinion, by having these. And it really blows for this because they gave you this, they gave this to you. They gave you a 3-zone ride cymbal. That's what this is. But you can't use it in the analog 1/4-inch ride zone ride ports because you used this. It's this or that, not both. So you got to plug this into the traditional crash port, and that means you only get 2 out of it instead of 3. Now you might say, well, big deal. Well, you know what? It is a big deal because these things are expensive. They cost money, as you probably know. And it isn't just the trigger. You got to get an arm for it, and you got to get a clamp for it, and they give you the cable, thank you very much, and then you can plug it in here. But you don't have to do that if you already have this. This one trigger has 3 sounds in it. That's really cool. Except you can't use it because you have the digital ride. It's a real shame. It's a real shame. And it's the same thing with the snare. The digital snare shuts off the 1/4-inch snare. The digital ride shuts off the 2 1/4-inch ride inputs. That, together with how expensive it is, how few sounds are in it, at least usable sounds as far as I'm concerned. You know what? They still included all the stupid garbage, whistles and white noise and car horns and crap that, I don't know, I guess you could use if you wanted to. I mean, you can use it for very specific songs, right? But to be able to have all those different kits available to you in a cover version, a cover band kind of thing, wow, what a letdown. And it's so expensive. And again, you've got to get a snare stand. It's got to be meaty because this sucker is heavy. And of course, to use their top of the line hi-hat, you have to have a hi-hat stand. My last kit did not have a hi-hat stand. My last kit did not have a snare stand. My last kit did not have a bass drum that weighs more than any actual bass drum I've ever had. I think Roland really blew it with the TD-50. Now, conversely, the TD-30 has a ton of sounds in it. I mean, all these great snare drums and great cymbals and all these different toms, all this different stuff. And of course, you can look all that up online. The problem now is, I think Roland realized that the TD-30 is a better deal. So they stopped making them. I'm pretty sure they stopped making them. Or they might have just stopped making a specific line of 30 because they were silver cymbals, and then it looked cool, but as you used them, the silver wore away and it didn't look that cool anymore. So they went back to the black, which to me looks fine anyway. But the TD-30, even at full price, is a much better brain, in my opinion, than the Roland TD-50. In terms of sounds offered, in terms of usability, you can use all the ports. Even if you get all these really cool ride cymbals and stuff, plugging in one doesn't kill the other ports. In terms of portability, it doesn't have a digital snare. So the snare that comes with it, the snare that you use, is one of these 12s. And by the way, these are really good. They still have the rim shot. and all that stuff. The only thing they don't have really is that cross sound that senses your hand. So you'll still have to either tell the kit that you're using, hey, I'm using cross stick, or you get a little BT1 like this. These are only about $100. You can get them even cheaper than that, and they're really good, actually. Put one off to the side and have a cross stick in it at all times. So you can just go. That is so not a cross stick sound, but you know what I mean. I have a BT1 over here. So I don't think that's such a big loss to lose that. I certainly don't think it's a loss to lose that. So what? You can choke any of them. Oh, okay, you can't kill it by putting your hand on it, but you can still choke it. I just don't think that's a big deal to pay that much extra money and lose all of those cool sounds, lose that expandability and flexibility, and gain a whole lot of weight and a whole lot of extra stands. I am unconvinced. Again, if you are looking to buy an electronic drum set and you're looking at Roland, I can see why. Rolands are great, played them for years. But if you're thinking about getting a TD-30 or a TD-50, I'm telling you, I have both of them. They're right there. Get a TD-30. Now you may have to get a used one or a demo one, but that just means you're not buying it brand new. That just means you're not spending a truckload of money on it. So that's my suggestion to you. Now, thanks for sticking around through the double stuff. Now I'm going to reward you with a tip, a really freaking cool tip. I don't know why everyone who has electronic kits doesn't do this. You have to do it a little bit differently for the kind of brains that you have, but for the newer, bigger brains like the 20s, the 30s, the 50s for sure, the 30s and 50s, this works.
60% of the time, it works every time.
There are two cables for your hi-hat. One controls the actual sound of the hi-hat, but the other one has to control the foot, your foot control, because you want to be able to splash, you want to be able to chick, you want to be able to make it sloshy, make it tight. So there's two separate controls, and there's two separate inputs for it. But here's the other thing that you can do. You can put another hi-hat controller. This is a VH13. This is a VH11. Did you see what I just did? My one foot controls both hi-hats. You can have two working hi-hats with one foot control, whether or not it's a hi-hat stand or their actual foot controller hi-hat. What you do on one of the auxiliary inputs, for instance, get another pad of some sort. You can even use like a PD8. You can use whatever you want. You put that into your auxiliary 4, we'll say. Then you tell auxiliary 4, this trigger is now a VH11. What you have to do when you plug all these things in is you have to tell the brain what kind of trigger you're using. It's assuming that you're using the trigger that comes with the brain, but sometimes you're upgrading and maybe you bought the brain afterwards or whatever. So you have to tell the brain, no, I'm not using a KD120, I'm using a KD140. And it adjusts accordingly to the sensitivity of that trigger. Well, because there are a lot of different ways to trigger a hi-hat. This one, I believe, is their top-of-the-line VH13. And usually the numbers pertain to the circumference of the trigger itself. So this is a 13-inch hi-hat. I don't know if you can see it really well, but it's actually two cymbals together, so it really mimics the hi-hat really well. But this one is a VH11. I believe it's 11 inches in diameter. And it's a single cymbal, as though it were pressed together at all times. It does not open. It does not physically open at all. You could also use any one of these pads or a BT1 as a hi-hat trigger. You just have to tell the brain that's what it is. So you tell the brain, hey, I'm using a VH13 or whatever it is, and you plug it in accordingly. But then you tell the auxiliary channel, say, I'm using a VH11 over here. And because the brain knows that they need to be controlled, this one hi-hat controller, it already has a cord plugged in there, will control this other one. See? I don't have to move my foot back and forth to control a different hi-hat. I don't have to have a closed hi-hat sound over there all the time, or reach up and loosen it or whatever. Look. On that side, I'm not moving my foot around. I got one pedal over here, this one. It's freaking awesome. You can also do 2 different sounds. Dark and warm. This is club hi-hat. You can tell they're 2 different sounds. So that's what's really cool about these brains, is that you can actually have 2 different hi-hats on like opposite sides of your kit that are actually controlled by 1 pedal. And it's a lot of fun for if you have your ride cymbal near it. You can play open play with the right hand. You don't have to cross, but you still can. The other nice thing about that is if you're a singing drummer, which I am, I have a microphone stand that comes around like this. A microphone, comes around like this. I don't have to cross over in front of my face, and I can still use a working hi-hat. I actually play like that, and the mic's right in the middle. So I never hit my mic. Now, if you have something like a TD-20 or a TD-9 or those kind of things, you buy a little splitter, a really nice one, gold contact, stereo, anyway. It's just a little plastic splitter for a 1/4-inch jack. And you put your controlling plug in the way you normally would, but in your hi-hat input, you put the splitter. And then you put one hi-hat in one side and the other hi-hat in the other side. The only thing is, it's using the same input, so you'll want to use the same trigger pad. That's why I had a VH11. On my old kit, I had 2 VH11s on both sides. So I told the brain, VH11. They were both VH11s. And you can only have 1 sound. You can't split the sound because you're not splitting inputs. You're only going to have 1 sound. But at least you will have 2 working sounds on the kit. They're both the same sound. I don't know why everyone doesn't have 2 working hi-hats on their electronic drums. They're so much fun, and it doesn't really cost you that much more because, again, you can use almost anything as a hi-hat input. You don't have to use the VH11s, which are a little expensive, and the VH13s, which are really expensive. This is a BT1. It's really dang cool, and right now I'll show you. That's a tambourine sound, obviously. I'm going to switch it to 129, which is a hi-hat sound. One of the 2. There you go. Look at that. It even knows it up there. The freaking thing knows to control the hi-hat sound no matter no matter what kind of trigger you have. That's great. So I know I promised you the Oreo, right? I told you right up front. TD-30 or TD-50? TD-30, trust me. Then I gave you the stuff, the reasons why. I gave you double stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff there, I'll admit. And then the other side of the Oreo, TD-30 or TD-50? For me, TD-30 hands down for a bunch of different reasons. Yes, the digital stuff is cool. It's not overly cool. It's not so cool that you're really going to tell that much of a difference for the ride. I didn't. In fact, to be honest with you, once I got the TD-30, I liked the old ride cymbal better than the digital ride cymbal. In fact, the only thing I liked about the digital ride cymbal was its size. It's kind of cool, but I guess size doesn't matter in this case. All right, so have fun.